Hey everyone, Kimsey here, and I am so glad to be here today. Happy Monday. It's been over a week since I was here. I had every intention of hopping on last Monday, and we got stuck in the weather trying to get home. We were in Breckenridge, we were trying to get home, and we got stuck. I-70 closed. There's blizzards like all across the United States. So we got stuck, and I ended up not making the live talk. So I'm very glad to be here today. And today I have a public service announcement for all of the people that set a New Year's resolution or intention to lose weight. And I really, really hope that today's talk leaves you feeling empowered and educated and full of knowledge on how you can optimize your success with weight loss, especially by understanding, because what I'm going to talk about today is busting the myth that weight loss is all about cutting calories and exercising more. So if you are 22 days into your weight loss journey, or maybe you are years into your weight loss journey and you've tried over and over again to lose weight, you yo-yo, your weight goes up and down, you lose a bunch of weight doing XYZ approach, but then it comes right back on when you go back to living a more normal lifestyle. If that is more of your story, then same thing. I really hope this talk empowers you. Okay, so before we get into it, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Kimsey Berkwin. I'm an integrative nutritionist in my online practice, Progressive Health and Wellness, where I embrace a root-caused body-mind approach to help ambitious do-it-allers optimize their mental and physical health. So I am streaming on Instagram. I'm live in my Facebook group, Holistic Solutions for Mental Health and Wellness. Also streaming on YouTube. I'm hitting all the platforms. I'm so thankful that a platform called StreamYard makes that easy. And this is not obviously I'm not paid to say that, but like they've made my life so much easier. So if you see me looking at multiple screens, A, that's why. B, if you're not on one of the platforms normally, then maybe you'll catch me on a different one where you spend more time. Okay, so today I'm going to share with you 4 different reasons, the 4 biggest reasons I see clinically that are holding people back maybe holding you back from losing weight. So to be clear, weight loss, I want to bust this myth right off the bat that weight loss is not only about cutting calories. Now, we understand the law of thermodynamics clearly states, right? Calories reflect the amount of essentially fuel that is needed to fuel all of your metabolic processes. And so if there's a caloric deficit, then you will use your own body resources to fuel those metabolic processes. If there's a caloric excess, then you're in more of a storage mode, like a fat storage mode. So thermodynamics, we get that. That's clear. What is not described, what is not thoroughly explained, and what ends up leaving people very frustrated and defeated and hopeless when they do try cutting calories and exercising more is we have to talk about the physiological factors that can affect the rate at which we burn calories, right? That can affect our metabolic rate. And so that is exactly what today's talk is about, what some of the biggest physiological factors are. So I'm going to jump right into it. I'm going to talk about the 4 factors and then some things that you can start to do to maybe enhance your success along your weight loss journey. Number 1 is estrogen dominance. So men, don't walk away because you heard the word estrogen. This very much applies to you too. So estrogen is a steroid sex hormone that is prevalent and needed in both men and women, just like testosterone is also needed in both men and women. Estrogen is also a very proliferative hormone, which means it tends to make things grow, including fat cells. And there's a direct connection between estrogen and fat accumulation. Not to mention, it can also become a vicious cycle because fat cells themselves can produce estrogen. Now, to give you a kind of crude visual, in factory raised cattle, they are actually fed estrogen because it's known to fatten them up faster. People tend to like the marbled look on meat, and estrogen can enhance that because marbling is fat, right? So, this is very clearly understood, right? The effect of estrogen on fat accumulation. Not to mention, it's a double whammy because estrogen interferes with our thyroid function. So I know somebody, I believe it was Krista, hi Krista, commented on this post on Facebook asking if I was going to talk about thyroid health. Yes and no, indirectly. So today, what I am going to talk about is estrogen dominance and insulin resistance and the gut microbiome and food sensitivities. And I'll talk about or reference how all of those actually impact the thyroid. But I'm not doing a talk specifically on thyroid because a lot of people are aware of that already, right? A lot of people know the connection between hypothyroidism and how hypothyroidism slows your metabolism and can lead to weight gain. And so they're asking their doctors to check their thyroid. Some are starting thyroid medication, etc. I do, with that said, I want this talk to be more enlightening in the sense of having people kind of like, oh my gosh, I had no idea XYZ could be affecting my weight. But I do, if you want more information on thyroid specific, all the things, I do have a ton of resources on thyroid health, including why your lab tests are normal, right? Why do you have hypothyroid symptoms when your lab tests are normal? I have live talks talking about the 3 patterns of hypothyroidism and how if you have normal TSH, you may still have hypothyroidism. And these are the 3 other patterns as to how. I talk about the importance of testing for Hashimoto's because 90% of hypothyroid cases are Hashimoto's. I'm not exaggerating. That's actual statistic. 90% of people that have been diagnosed with hypothyroidism, it's actually Hashimoto's that's driving it. I have live talks that talk about holistic approaches and integrative approaches to hypothyroidism. So if you want more thyroid info, please go to my Facebook group. It's called Holistic Solutions for Mental Health and Wellness. In the group, search thyroid and you'll find all of those resources. You can also search the guides section of the group where a lot of those talks and many other talks are archived. So I'm just putting that out there up front. I will reference thyroid and hypothyroidism today, but because it's one of the, a thing that comes to mind for a lot of people already that are struggling to lose weight and they already know about the connection, I'm not going to talk specifically about it. Okay, that was a huge tangent. So I'm going back to estrogen dominance. And I was talking about how estrogen dominance, i.e. high estrogen, can negatively impact thyroid. The way that it does that, your thyroid will still function fine typically, although estrogen does influence the uptake of iodine. So it can actually influence the functioning of the thyroid itself. But one of the bigger ways that we see is high estrogen upregulates what's called thyroid binding globulin, which is a protein that basically renders the thyroid hormone unavailable at the cellular level. So then people can have hypothyroid symptoms, but their labs may even still be normal. So that's the connection to one connection between high estrogen and thyroid and its connection to slowing our metabolism. And of course, increasing weight. You will also hear more about estrogen dominance when we start talking about insulin resistance, because insulin resistance, which is my point number 2, can increase estrogen. It can, especially in men. So men, if you have insulin resistance increases the activity of an enzyme called aromatase that actually causes your testosterone to be converted into estrogen. So you can have low testosterone, high estrogen, which for men, that is not a hormonal pattern that you want, right? That's not what leaves you thriving, feeling like you're thriving. So going back to estrogen dominance and high estrogen levels, you might be wondering, well, what would cause my estrogen levels to be high? There's a number of factors. For one, xenoestrogens in the environment. So we recognize the impact that xenoestrogens, which are chemicals in our environment that have a structure that very closely mimics our estrogen. And we used to think that it just mimicked our estrogen, these xenoestrogens, which are found in things like phthalates and formaldehyde, and the most universally widespread pesticide or herbicide called glyphosate. We have, let's see, what other chemicals? I'm blanking on some of the other chemicals, parabens that mimic estrogen. But we used to think that it just mimicked estrogen. We now understand not only does it mimic it at the cellular level, but it also increases, it upregulates our body's own production of estradiol, which is the most potent form of estrogen. So double whammy there. So xenoestrogens are big. Oh, BPA, there we go. Receipt paper, BPA. The chemicals are just going to keep coming to me. So I'm going to like randomly shout out chemicals as we keep talking. Well, this isn't a xenotoxin, but point number 2, toxin exposure. So certain types of mycotoxins from mold can also increase estrogen production by actually, I should clarify how I say that. It doesn't necessarily increase estrogen production. It interferes with the liver, the glucuronidation pathway in the liver, which is one of the pathways by which estrogen is metabolized. It slows that pathway. So mycotoxin exposure, there is, I talked about insulin resistance, imbalances within the gut microbiome. So there's a whole classification of gut microbes called the estrobolome, because of the significant effect that they have on estrogen levels in men and women. There's an enzyme that gut bacteria will produce called beta-glucuronidase. And when that's elevated, we end up recycling our estrogen from the digestive tract rather than eliminating it in the bowels, which is how it's supposed to be done. Speaking of, I've kind of referenced the liver and the gallbladder, or the bowels, the digestive tract. So estrogen normally, whether we produce it or we take it or we're unknowingly exposed to it, is then metabolized through the liver, through glucuronidation and sulfation pathways and methylation pathways, through the liver, through the gallbladder, dumps into the intestines, where it's then supposed to be eliminated in the bowels. So anywhere that pathway breaks down can contribute to higher estrogen. We'll see this with gallbladder issues too. And in fact, high estrogen can cause gallbladder issues. It causes bile to become more thickened and sludge-like, which then can lead to cholecystitis or gallbladder inflammation. Plus, kind of the vicious cycle of things again lead back to the elevated estrogen levels also. So if there's liver stagnation, gallbladder issues, bowel stagnation, right? You have diarrhea or constipation. Those can also lead to a reuptake or a recycling of estrogen. Okay. Of course, if you're taking it, right? Birth control, hello, especially women, if you're on a hormonal birth control that contains estrogen, and you'll see a word in there that typically mimics like estradiol on the label to know if your birth control contains estrogen. That can lead to estrogen dominance. We're adding on an extra load to the body. It puts a load on the liver. It disrupts the gut microbiome. It sucks up our B vitamins and other resources that we would normally use to keep estrogen levels in check. So it affects the thyroid. It has all the same components. So birth control, and then obviously hormone replacement therapy too in certain circumstances. Okay. I think those are the main connections to estrogen dominance, high estrogen levels. Now let's continue. I'm going to talk about tips towards the end and things that you can do. I guess it might make sense to go as we go. So some things that can help with estrogen levels. A, avoid plastics as much as possible. Store your food in glass. Drink water out of stainless steel. I cannot encourage enough getting a water purification system. Again, going to those hormonal birth controls, hormone replacement therapy, there are measurable amounts of estrogen in our tap water. That's one of the connections to the whole fish reproductive issue that's going on. So filtering your water is huge. I like Berkey or Aquasana filtration systems. So avoid plastics, storage ware, filter your water. Don't use Teflon. Use like stainless steel or ceramic or some kind of a non-toxic form of cookware. Detoxify your environment, in other words. Optimize gut health if needed. So if you have digestive issues, say optimize gut health, that's really a much longer conversation. But if you do have digestive issues, especially constipation, seek to optimize the digestion. So one thing that you can do for constipation is try magnesium citrate or magnesium glycinate before bed. It can be really, really helpful in moving the bowels. Fiber is really helpful too for both binding out the estrogen and for helping the gallbladder. So psyllium is awesome. Partially hydrolyzed guar is great. Flaxseed is helpful. Chia seed, ground flax, ground chia seed, those are all helpful. And then of course, like fiber in your food, fruits and vegetables, etc. Leafy greens, dark cruciferous vegetables. That's really what I'm looking for. Cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, kale, bok choy. They all contain a nutrient called calcium D-glucarate that also helps bind out that estrogen in the gut and safely eliminate it. Broccoli sprouts, even better. So those are some examples. And then up your B vitamin intake, up your mineral intake. Those are really important for effective detoxification of estrogen too. Okay, number 2, that was all things estrogen, high estrogen connection to weight loss or difficulty losing weight. For those of you that are joining me now, which hello, I see Caroline and Meaningful Creations and Mom to Imte. Hi, hello. So glad to see everybody joining here. If you are joining me, by the way, let me know that you're here. Drop a comment, drop a wave, introduce yourself and what drew you to this talk, where you're watching from. I'd love to get as much collaboration as possible. Okay, so point 2 as to what may be interfering with your weight loss. Insulin resistance. We cannot have a conversation about difficulty losing weight without talking about insulin resistance. One thing I'm going to put right out there up front is insulin resistance is also a strong word, meaning some of you might be listening to this saying like, well, I don't think I have it. My doctor's never talked to me about it. My labs come back normal. You can have elevated insulin levels. It is one of the earliest markers that you can check on blood work in the process, the progression that is normal blood sugar to type 2 diabetes. So you can have insulin resistance and not know it, in other words. This is why we test fasting insulin on everyone. It's part of our routine blood workup. In addition to hemoglobin A1C and fasting glucose and the lipid panels, we get a really thorough picture of what someone's blood sugar is doing. Now, some symptoms of insulin resistance that you might identify with. Number 1, do you become ravenously hungry, hangry, irritable, shaky, tired, foggy if you go longer than 3 to 4 hours without eating? Do you crave sugar in general? Do you especially crave sugar after meals? So like after dinner, do you want something sweet? After lunch, do you want something sweet? Do you crave carbs? Do you eat a meal and shortly afterwards feel like you're hungry again? These can all be examples. Do you pee excessively? Do you urinate excessively? And then again, like, are you struggling to lose weight, right? Those are symptoms of imbalanced insulin. So blood sugar regulation is one of the most important components of optimal health. The human body is designed to be what's called metabolically flexible, which means if glucose from carbohydrates is available, we'll always burn glucose. It's the easiest source of fuel. But if we don't have glucose available, like if we're fasting, ancestrally speaking, if we couldn't find a hunt, couldn't find a kill, couldn't find food, famine, right, in a very low carb diet, the body shifts over and burns fat for fuel. However, the body is adaptive. And for the first time in ever human history, we always have glucose available, right? We just have to go to the grocery store. So we lose that adaptation. And through a variety of mechanisms like high stress, poor diet, higher carbohydrate, higher sugar intake, and many other things, even gut microbiome imbalances, chronic inflammation, it can lead to a desensitization of the cells to insulin. So what normally happens is when we eat carbohydrates, our pancreas releases insulin to get those carbs into the cell so that we can burn it for fuel. But if we're constantly eating carbohydrates and constantly having these insulin surges, the cells, it's like if you were to have a neighbor that comes over and knocks on your door every hour on the hour, you're just going to eventually pretend like you're not home, right? Well, the cells do the same thing. They suck in their insulin receptors. Quite literally, a healthy cell has roughly 100,000 receptors for insulin, whereas a diabetic cell has about 1,000. So it down-regulates insulin receptors, which leads to chronically elevated levels of insulin and eventually chronically elevated levels of blood sugar, glucose. And over time, that's where the diagnosis of type 2 diabetes comes into play. Now, the important part, how does high insulin affect our weight? There's a few different ways. One, chronically elevated insulin, or just high insulin in general, interferes with, there's a hormone, a cellular hormone called hormone sensitive lipase. That's when it's released by the cells, it normally promotes the breakdown of fat stores so that we can burn that fat for fuel. Insulin interferes with that hormone, doesn't release it. Number two, insulin tells our body that we are in a fed state. If insulin is high, we are in a storage mode. Calories that we eat will be stored as long as our fuel requirements are already met. If our fuel needs are met, any excess, any surplus is stored as fat. Fat cells are one of the only types of cell that can take limitless amounts of energy, of fuel. So if insulin is high, we are not in a metabolic position, a metabolic capacity to break down our fat cells and use it for fuel, right? Insulin interferes with that. When insulin is low, that's the difference. When insulin is low, which would normally happen when we're in a more fasted state, then the body's like, oh, we don't have carbs coming in. We need fuel. Not a problem. We'll just shift over and start burning fat for fuel. That hormone sensitive lipase goes up amongst other hormones, and we can burn that fat for fuel in the form of ketones. But if insulin is high, it's physiologically blocking that ability by telling the body we're in a fed state. Therefore, we are not going to break down our fuel reserves. We already have too much fuel, right? So with high insulin, we are locked in fat storage mode. It inhibits ketosis. It inhibits the breakdown of fat. And the calories that we do eat, we are prone to store as fat. So what can you do for higher insulin? First of all, I think it's really important to get data on your health and know where you are. So if you have medical records, if you are wanting to get a routine physical or something, have your doctor run these labs, talk to us about running these labs. Know what your fasting insulin is. Know what that number is. Know what your hemoglobin A1C is. If it's 5.1 is where we like to see people, or a little bit less. 5.2, I'm not really concerned about. If your doctor has told you that 5.6 isn't bad because it's not yet pre-diabetes, you have a problem, right? You need to have a new doctor. That is a problem. If it's 5.7 or higher, then that would be where a doctor starts having the conversation around prediabetes. I believe it's 6.4 or higher for type 2 diabetes diagnosis. So if you're looking at the 5.3, 5.4, 5.5 range, it's suboptimal. You're probably having these blood sugar swings rather than it being low and nice and controlled during the day. And by blood sugar swings, I mean insulin spikes also. So there's optimization to be had there. Okay, so what can you do about it? One of my favorite techniques is intermittent fasting. I love intermittent fasting. During the fasted period, you're keeping insulin low. It helps in restore that metabolic flexibility. It enhances the sensitivity of the cells to insulin. So there's many different ways that you can do intermittent fasting. What I usually recommend for my clients is incorporating some variation of the 8-16 method. So depending on the person, that may be 3-4 days a week. It could be 5 to 7 days a week of eating a full day's worth of calories within an 8-hour time frame, and then fasting for roughly 16 hours, mostly overnight while you sleep. So that's one method. You can do this for, other days of the week, 12 to 14 hours, but ideally no less than 12 hours between when you finish eating and when you start eating the next day. Second, break your fast with protein. So if you're one of those people that, wakes up and eats a banana and slams a cup of coffee with sugary creamer in it and gets on your way, recipe for disaster. So break your fast with protein. A couple of eggs with avocado. You can eat hard-boiled eggs if you're on the go. You can have some eggs and sweet potato and avocado. You could have a protein smoothie blended with coconut, cream, and blueberries. It doesn't have to be like no carb. You just want it to be predominantly protein and fat because that's a much slower fuel release. And then exercise is so helpful for insulin resistance and high insulin, because exercise, we build more mitochondria in our cells. So we have more factories to burn glucose and we have a higher fuel need, right? So with exercise, the body's like, whoa, suddenly our previous fuel needs we need more, right? That's not enough. And so you'll form more insulin receptors for that. And then you have the metabolic machinery to actually deal with that fuel. So exercise is wonderful. Especially, I love HIIT workouts, 10-minute HIIT workouts, right? High intensity interval training, 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, elevate your heart rate to the point where it's like kind of hard to talk for 30 seconds. Run up and down stairs, do burpees, jumping jacks, jump squats, push-ups, mountain climbers, whatever you want to do. There's great YouTube channel resources. There's great apps. HIIT workouts are awesome. And who doesn't have 10 minutes? Okay. So, sorry, I'm getting over a cold. All right. Insulin resistance, we talked about estrogen dominance, insulin resistance. Number 3 is the gut microbiome. So imbalances within the gut microbiome. We are realizing the gut microbiome impacts everything. Quite literally, the gut microbiome can convert calories that we eat into a different kind of macronutrient. So like protein into carbs, for example. Just like the gut microbiome can influence how we respond to certain medications. The gut microbiome produces what are called postbiotics or short chain fatty acids. I should say short chain fatty acids are a type of postbiotic. So basically how the microbiome interacts with the food that we eat, and they produce chemicals in response to that can impact our insulin signaling, our inflammation, our thyroid, our liver. So all of those things thereby impact metabolism. The microbiome is also a source of inflammation or anti-inflammation. So it's hard to say, you won't always have symptoms, overt symptoms, but if you do have digestive symptoms, gas, bloating, acid reflux, constipation, diarrhea mixed, then that may be connected to the inability to lose weight. And that can be through those metabolic disruptors, like I just mentioned, like inflammation, endotoxin production, nutrient deficiencies driven by malabsorption from the gut microbiome, just to name a few. So for optimizing the gut microbiome, this really, really depends on what's going on. There's not really a one-size-fits-all approach, but I will say some things that you can do. First of all, again, get data. Data is really empowering. We love the GI map stool test. It can be helpful to run a SIBO test or hydrogen sulfide breath test if you suspect SIBO or EMO. And then a few things that you can do is eat in a calm, relaxed state of mind. Eat fermented food if you tolerate it. Eat healthy fibers if you tolerate them. Those are some kind of broad strokes. Space your meals by 3 to 4 hours to support the migrating motor complex and microbiome. Broad strokes things. Okay, and number 4 is food sensitivities. So food sensitivities, the connection here is food sensitivities create inflammation. The body then responds to that inflammation in a couple of ways. One, there's a cortisol release, right? Cortisol is not just a stress hormone. It's also an anti-inflammation hormone. It's designed to manage the inflammatory response. So if we're constantly eating food that's driving inflammation and we're constantly having these cortisol spikes, not a good thing. Cortisol leads to weight gain, especially around the midsection. So that's one way. In addition, remember this, the body's solution to pollution is dilution. And in this case, chronic inflammation driven by food sensitivities, unknown food sensitivities, counts as pollution. So what I mean by pollution is dilution is we will retain water in response to inflammation. And most people know that, right? They can feel when they feel inflamed, they often feel puffy too. And quite literally, that's the case. So that's another way. 3, with those chronic cortisol spikes, that also interferes with our insulin signaling. So we can actually, people are really surprised to learn if they wear a continuous glucose monitor, they may start seeing their insulin spike in response to, or like their blood sugar spike in response to foods that like almonds, right? That shouldn't normally make one's blood sugar spike. That's what's happening. The cortisol is being mobilized and that's causing this blood sugar spike because that's what cortisol does. So it causes this blood sugar spike. So if you're having all these blood sugar spikes, again, we talk about the connection to blood sugar spikes and insulin resistance. So that's another connection. So food sensitivities. I love testing for food sensitivities. Also, I should say food sensitivities will often create other symptoms, right? Like fogginess and joint pain and headaches and insomnia and skin issues and digestive issues. There's actually someone in my Facebook group that commented on this post today saying that they cut out gluten and dairy and the weight just melted off. And that is frankly something I see all the time. I expect people in the first 3 to 4 weeks that I'm working with a new client, we're really laying the foundation with an anti-inflammatory and nutrient-dense diet, nutrition plan. I expect them to lose weight in those first 3 to 4 weeks as we're reducing the inflammation and balancing out their blood sugar. So I love testing for food sensitivities. We run the mediator response test, MRT. You can also do like a Whole30 or a paleo style diet for 3 to 4 weeks. That cuts out a lot of the more pro-inflammatory processed foods, and then try introducing those foods back in and see how it makes you feel. Okay, everyone. That's all I've got for you today. So if you're listening to this and you're frustrated that you're like 3 weeks into your weight loss plan, or like I said before, you're maybe months to years into your weight loss journey and you're not seeing sustainable results, my public service announcement to you today is that it is not your fault. There may be factors that feel completely unrelated to your weight that could be directly impacting your ability to lose weight. That is why we take a very personalized approach to weight loss. We look at functional labs. We do a deep assessment into your health history, your current health, and we put together a plan based on all of that data to optimize your overall physical and mental health, including weight loss. So if you are ready for a plan and an approach like that, and not one that's just going to tell you to cut carbs and calories and exercise more, then schedule a free call with us. The link is, I'll drop the link on Instagram. It's in my bio, in my Facebook group. It's like all over the place, but it's in the welcome post that's pinned to the top of the Facebook group. I think it's actually in this post also. Schedule a free call with us. We'll just learn more about your health, your history, your symptoms, things that you've tried so far. I'll share a little bit about our approach and our process. And if it feels like a good fit, wonderful. We'll talk about the next steps. And if it doesn't, that's okay too. So there's no pressure attached to it. All right, everyone. Hope this helps. Enjoy the rest of your week. Have a great rest of your week. Bye.